The air in the View studio was thick with tension as the crew prepared for another episode. But this was no ordinary day. Julia Roberts, the iconic Hollywood actress, was set to appear as a guest, and everyone knew that sparks were likely to fly. As the theme music faded and the cameras rolled, Julia strode onto the stage, her signature smile in place. But there was a glint of something else in her eyes, a hint of determination, a readiness for battle. The pleasantries were short-lived. As soon as Julia took her seat, Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, her expression serious. "So, Julia," she began, "you've been quite vocal lately about the role of celebrities in politics. You really think it's our place to be telling people what to think?" Julia didn't miss a beat. "I think it's our place to use our platform responsibly," she replied, her tone even. "To raise awareness, to encourage dialogue. We have a voice, Whoopi. We have a duty to use it." Whoopi scoffed. "A duty? Julia, we're entertainers, not politicians. It's not our job to lecture people." The audience murmured, the tension palpable. Julia sat up straighter, her gaze unwavering. "No one's lecturing anyone," she said, her voice growing firmer. "But we can't pretend we don't have influence. When we see injustice, when we see suffering, how can we stay silent? How is that responsible?" Whoopi's eyes narrowed. "It's not our responsibility to save the world, Julia. We're not equipped for that. We're just people, like everyone else." Julia leaned forward, her voice rising. "But we're not like everyone else, Whoopi. We have a platform. We have resources. And with that comes a moral obligation. We can't just sit back and watch the world burn." The audience was getting restless now, whispers turning to shouts. Whoopi raised her hands, trying to calm the crowd. Okay, she said, her voice strained. "Let's take a step back here. Julia, I respect your passion, but you're oversimplifying a complex issue. It's not always clear what the right thing to do is." Julia's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Isn't it? When we see children in cages, when we see families torn apart, when we see our planet on the brink of collapse, you're telling me it's not clear what the right thing to do is?" Whoopi's face hardened. "Don't put words in my mouth, Julia. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it." But Julia was on a roll now, her words coming fast and furious. "Then what are you saying, Whoopi? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're advocating for silence, for complacency, for the status quo." The audience erupted, some cheering, some booing. The other co-hosts looked on, frozen, unsure how to intervene. Whoopi stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How dare you?" she said, her voice shaking with anger. "How dare you come on my show and accuse me of complacency? I have been fighting these battles since before you were born, Julia. Don't you dare lecture me about activism." Julia stood to meet her, not giving an inch. "And what battles are those, Whoopi? The ones that are comfortable for you? The ones that don't risk your precious career, your precious reputation?" Whoopi's face went slack with shock. "Excuse me." Julia pressed on, relentless. "You've been in this industry for decades, Whoopi. You've seen the injustice, the corruption. But what have you done about it? When have you risked anything to speak out?" Whoopi was sputtering now, her composure cracking. "I have always used my voice for what I believe in. How can you stand there and question my integrity?" Julia's smile was sad, almost pitying. "Because I don't see integrity, Whoopi. I see someone who's grown comfortable. Someone who's forgotten what it means to fight." The studio was in chaos now, people shouting, security guards rushing the stage. But Julia stood tall, unflinching in the face of the storm she had unleashed. Whoopi pointed a shaking finger at her, rage and hurt etched on her face. "Get out," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get off my stage, out of my studio. Now." Julia nodded, almost as if she had been expecting this. "Gladly," she said, her voice calm, controlled. "But know this, Whoopi. Know that today, you didn't just silence me. You silenced every voice that looks to you for courage, for leadership. You showed them that when things get tough, you'd rather turn away than stand up." She turned to the audience, her eyes blazing. "But I won't be silenced. We won't be silenced. Because this fight is bigger than me, bigger than Whoopi, bigger than any one of us." She started to walk off, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Change is coming," she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "With or without you, Whoopi. With or without any of you. So you can either get on board, or you can get out of the way. But you will not stop this movement. You will not stop the truth." And with that, she was gone, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the audience began to stir. Some stood up, gathering their things to leave. Others sat in shocked disbelief, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Backstage, Julia was shaking, the adrenaline of the moment still coursing through her veins. She knew there would be fallout from this, knew she would be painted as a diva, a troublemaker. But she also knew she had done what needed to be done. She had spoken her truth, consequences be damned. She had stood up when so many others chose to sit down. And she knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that this was only the beginning. That the fight she had just ignited would rage on, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights went dim. She squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. Because she was Julia Roberts. And she had never been one to back down from a fight. Especially not one as important as this. In the days and weeks that followed, the media was abuzz with talk of the showdown on The View. Pundits dissected every word, every gesture, trying to parse the meaning behind the confrontation. Some praised Julia as a hero, a fearless advocate for change. Others condemned her as a bully, a hypocrite who had used her fame to attack and belittle. But for those who had been in that studio, for those who had seen the fire in Julia's eyes and heard the passion in her voice, there was no denying the impact of her words. She had started a conversation, one that was long overdue, about the role of celebrities in society, about the power and responsibility of fame, about the urgent need for change in a world that often seemed bent on self-destruction. And slowly, tentatively, that conversation began to spread. In living rooms and boardrooms, in classrooms and community centers, people started to talk about the issues that Julia had raised, about the challenges that faced their communities, their country, their planet. It wasn't always easy. These were thorny, complex problems, ones that defied simple solutions. There were disagreements, heated debates, moments of frustration and despair. But there was also a sense of possibility, of purpose, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. That the old ways of doing things, the old power structures and hierarchies, were starting to crumble. And at the center of it all was Julia Roberts. Not the movie star, not the glamorous celebrity, but the woman, the activist, the voice of a generation that was hungry for change. She didn't shy away from the attention, didn't retreat into the safety of her Hollywood bubble. Instead, she leaned in, using her platform to amplify the voices of others, to shine a light on the issues that mattered most. She spoke at rallies and marches, met with grassroots organizers and community leaders. She used her wealth and her influence to support causes and campaigns that were working to make a difference. And everywhere she went, she carried with her the message that had started it all. The simple, powerful idea that silence was no longer an option, that to be a bystander was to be complicit, that the time for action was now. It wasn't a popular message, not in all quarters. There were those who resisted, who clung to the old ways, the old certainties. There were those who mocked and derided, who sought to discredit and dismiss. But Julia would not be deterred. She had seen the hunger in people's eyes, the yearning for something better. She knew that the tide was turning, that a new day was dawning. And she knew, with every fiber of her being, that she would be there to see it through, to fight the good fight, no matter how long it took, no matter how hard it got, because that was who she was. That was what she had been put on this earth to do, not to entertain, but to inspire, not to distract, but to awaken, to be a light in the darkness, a voice in the silence, to stand up, even when others chose to sit down, to speak truth to power, no matter the cost. And as she looked out at the sea of faces before her, at the crowds that had gathered to hear her speak, she knew that she was not alone, that there were countless others who shared her vision, her hope, her unshakable belief in a better tomorrow. Together, they would build that tomorrow, brick by brick, day by day, one small act of courage at a time. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and despair. But they would not falter. They would not fail, because they were a movement, a family, a force for change that could not be denied. And at the head of that movement, leading the charge, was a woman named Julia Roberts. A woman who had kicked down the doors of complacency and shone a light into the shadows. A woman who had dared to speak out, to stand up, to fight back. A woman who had started a revolution, not with guns or bombs, but with the most powerful weapon of all, her voice. And as that voice rang out, strong and clear and true, the world listened. And the world began to change. One view at a time, one heart at a time, one soul at a time, until the day came when the old ways had crumbled to dust, and a new dawn had risen. A dawn of justice, of equality, of hope. A dawn that Julia Roberts had helped to bring about, with nothing more than the courage of her convictions and the power of her words. And as she stood in the light of that new day, surrounded by the faces of those she had inspired, she knew that it had all been worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and fear. Because she had made a difference. She had changed lives. She had left her mark on the world. And that, in the end, was the greatest role of all. Not the ingenue, not the leading lady, but the hero, the warrior, the voice of a generation. Julia Roberts had found her calling, and she would never look back. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it's only the beginning. Because the fight that Julia started on that fateful day on The View is one that continues to this day. It is the fight for a more just, more equitable, more compassionate world. A world where every voice is heard, every story is valued, every dream is given wings to fly. And it is a fight that belongs to all of us. To every person who has ever felt silenced, marginalized, pushed to the sidelines. To every soul who has yearned for something better, something more. Julia showed us the way. She lit the spark. But it is up to us to keep the flame alive. To take up the torch and carry it forward into a future that is brighter, bolder, more beautiful than we ever dared to imagine. So let us draw strength from her example. Let us find courage in her words. Let us stand tall in the face of adversity and speak our truth with grace and conviction. For we are all Julia Roberts in our own way. We all have a voice, a vision, a role to play in the great unfolding story of our time. And together, there is nothing we cannot achieve. No barrier we cannot break. No dream we cannot make real. The stage is set. The moment is now. Let us go forth and make our mark. For ourselves, for each other, for the world we share. The spotlight is waiting. The audience is ready. It's time to take our places and let the show begin. In this version, I've shifted the focus to a confrontation between Julia Roberts and Whoopi Goldberg, with Julia accusing Whoopi of complacency and Whoopi defending her record of activism. The argument escalates until Whoopi kicks Julia off the show, but not before Julia delivers a passionate call to action. From there, the story follows Julia as she becomes a vocal advocate for change, using her platform to raise awareness and inspire others. It paints her as a heroic figure, a voice for the marginalized and the oppressed, who is willing to risk her career and her comfort to fight for what's right. The language is emotional and dramatic, with lots of vivid imagery and rhetorical flourishes. There are multiple cliffhangers and moments of high tension, as well as a strong call to action for the listener to follow Julia's example and become a force for change in their own lives. The story ends on a hopeful, empowering note, suggesting that Julia's actions have sparked a larger movement and inviting the listener to be a part of that movement. It frames the fight for social justice as an ongoing struggle that belongs to everyone and suggests that by standing together and speaking out, ordinary people have the power to change the world. Throughout, I've tried to maintain a tone of passion, urgency, and inspiration, using Julia's story as a vehicle to explore larger themes of activism, responsibility, and the power of the individual to make a difference. It's a story designed to stir emotions, provoke thought, and most of all, to motivate action. Of course, as with any piece of creative writing, there's always room for refinement and revision. Feel free to provide feedback or suggestions, and I'll be happy to iterate on the story until it meets your vision. The goal is to create a compelling, impactful narrative that leaves the listener both entertained and inspired.